Episode 1 starts with Riley's character named Rebecca telling us that the story is the opposite of a fairy tale, unless you really consider what fairy tales are really about. Tales of horror, there's violence everywhere, and a lot of tales of girls being punished. A girl named Reena gets picked up by her uncle from school. She says she hates PE and she skipped some parts of school because of it. She doesn't like the shorts that they're made to wear, but she is happy now because her uncle bought her a CD that she's been wanting. She asks him to drive a certain way home and she points out a boy named Connor Fields on the side of the road as they drive past him. When she says that it's her friend Josephine who likes him, her uncle says that he thought that she was done with the Seven Oaks girls. He gently tells her that maybe it's time for her to focus on her family for a bit, and this obviously touches a nerve. Reena doesn't take this well. She gets out of the car while it's half moving. She doesn't want to hear it. She ends up with another friend named Dusty, and we find out that Seven Oaks, where she is now, is a youth home, a kind of foster home. They go inside to hang out with the aforementioned Josephine, or Jo. She's the Regina George of the group, or more accurately, she's Nikki Reed's character from the movie 13. She tells the girls a story about ripping the necklace off the neck of another girl, and they all clearly think she's so cool. Reena announces to her friends that she got the new Biggie CD, which is pretty exciting for all of them. The girls all start rapping and dancing about. When Reena starts jumping on the bed, Jo snaps and kind of ends the fun, and she demands that Reena get off and that she basically leave. Jo really asks why Reena is even there. She thought that Reena had moved out. The girls then go to another location and Jo tells Reena that she's not invited. Before leaving, Reena takes Jo's journal or phone book and a bottle of nail polish. So while these girls are really either orphans or their families are just not in the picture, Reena is choosing to come here to the home, even though, judging from her uncle's car and the way that he was with her, she comes from a decent family. Rebecca has just landed in Victoria and she's writing her book on the girls in Victoria. So she's back home to do some research and or talk to the town's residents. She stays at her parents' home and they give her a warm welcome, but we learn that it's been 10 years since she's been back home from New York, and there is some tension under the surface with her mother. Her mother isn't thrilled by the idea of her writing about Victoria, and at the mention of somebody named Gabe, there's a lot of uneasy silence in the kitchen. Reena uses the phone book she took from Jo's room to call people and tell them that Josephine is fat or slutty, typical high school mean rumors that are a little too crazy for anybody to believe, unless maybe you're in high school still. Then she calls Connor and tells him that Josephine has AIDS and she asks him out. Later, when Josephine asks Connor for a drag of a cigarette or his weed, he says no, he heard that she had AIDS. The guys tell her then of the other rumors that they heard about her, and Josephine demands to know who told them. Obviously, it was Reena. Reena has a really nice seeming family, on the surface at least. They do seem pretty religious. She's going through her little rebellious streak saying that she doesn't want to eat Indian food because she thinks it makes her fat. Josephine calls Reena at home then to tell her to come to a party. By the way, Reena is a little rude. She just leaves the dinner table to go and answer the phone, and she also leaves her family dinner, much to their frustration and against their wishes. She's off to this party. She meets the girls at the party, and she finds out that Josephine had actually set her up to fight with another girl. Reena takes off running then, and she gets into a phone box, and she calls home quickly to say that she'll be home soon. The girls soon catch up to her though and take her with him, refusing to let her go home. A woman named Cam and her dad are doing some boxing training. She wants her dad to put in a good word for her for a transfer to Vancouver, but he's not keen on her leaving. They're all in law enforcement and they work down at the station together along with Cam's brother Scott. A few days later, Reena's uncle is at the police station telling the police that they haven't seen her since Friday when she called from the bus stop to say that she would be home soon. They're certain that something is wrong, but the cops don't seem concerned. Her uncle says that he found the phone book, Josephine's, and she was hanging out at Seven Oaks that day. He vents his frustration then at the cops who refuse to do anything. As they leave, Cam goes after him, saying that they're not trying to give them a hard time, but this is just the kind of thing that happens because girls tend to wander off. And Reena might have been a little bit troubled as well, so this is probably not new for her. Rebecca gets her dad's car and heads over to Seven Oaks to talk to some of the girls there. The house mother doesn't allow it, but she's called away, and just then Josephine walks in asking for the paper to see if there's any news on Reena. The girls take an interest in Rebecca, and she tells them that she's writing a book on the misunderstood girls of Victoria. She leaves them her number for them to call her if they want to talk, but they want to talk already, so she stays at Sevenoaks. Rebecca leans into her cool New York girl vibe that the girls are enamored by. She asks them about Reena, and Josephine says that it's not a big deal. Every time Reena misses curfew, a police report is always filed. Girls go missing in this town, and they tell Rebecca that the cops call them the big girls because they're as disposable as those lighters. Reena's mom starts packing her things, making like she's done with Reena's shenanigans. Her father thinks that they shouldn't get rid of the things. Just then somebody calls the house about Reena, but they sound scared on the phone and they quickly hang up. Cam asks Connor about Reena, and he says that she's not his type, but she probably just called him on a dare that day. Then he tells her that Josephine told him that CMC is going to make sure that he doesn't hear from Reena again. No idea who CMC is. I think it is the name of their little girl gang, because at the beginning of the episode, the letters CMC were written on Reena's hand in black Koki marker. Connor also suggests that Reena might be floating around somewhere. That's what people have been saying. Later at the station, Scott, who is Cam's brother, is still downplaying Reena's disappearance, whereas Cam is starting to take it a little seriously. Also, we find out because of Josephine's diary that CMC stands for Crip Mafia Cartel, so yeah, their little gang. Cam suggests they search the gorge, and this doesn't go over too well with her dad and her brother, who think that she's overreacting, but her dad does give her the go-ahead since Reena has been missing for 3 days after all. The divers do find Reena's underwear in the gorge, and because of this, the police go and they collect the kids connected and bring them to the station for a talk. They also see the CCTV footage from the bus stop of all the party kids chasing Reena, but that's not all. They do see footage of Reena stumbling by the bridge alone after the supposed attack. She looks hurt, but she's very able to walk, so she maybe survived? Anyway, in the end, of course, the Sevenoaks girls don't really have anybody when they're in custody, so Josephine calls Rebecca after unsuccessfully trying to call her mom to get her. When Rebecca comes for Josephine, she has this weird smile on her face and she asks if Rebecca can keep a secret. In episode 2, we go back 8 months to when Reena seemed a little happier. It's her birthday, but she's soon disappointed by her parents treating it like any other day because they're Jehovah's Witnesses. She even tells her mother that she hoped for a special breakfast, but her mother tells her that remember what they learned at the Kingdom Hall? That death is more important than the day of birth? Anyway, we cut to her in the present, well, on the Friday night of her disappearance, stumbling over the bridge in the dark. Because Cam and the rest of the cops have seen this CCTV footage, the kids who were all at the station are now being let go. Scott seems kind of pleased that Cam has egg on her face. Reena is alive after all, so they think they're in the right, that Cam's worrying had been for nothing. Father's also kind of disappointed in her. Rebecca takes Josephine to a diner, and when she asks Josephine how she ended up at Sevenoaks, Josephine says that her mom's boyfriend couldn't handle her, so she eventually left. A comment about Gabe from a waiter who knows Rebecca leads to her telling Josephine a little bit about him. He was her brother who died when they were kids, but she doesn't want to go into detail. She doesn't want to talk anymore about it. Josephine tells Rebecca about the rumors that Reena spread about her, so she had to teach Reena a lesson, she says. She'll show Rebecca what happened, but in exchange, she wants to go to New York with her, and she wants to be the star of Rebecca's book. Someone calls Reena's parents again, but just breathes on the phone before hanging up. Turns out Cam and Rebecca knew each other. I mean, we saw a suggestion of this in an earlier scene anyway. Cam asks what's going on exactly. Rebecca somehow comes home after 10 years, right in the middle of the investigation. Anyway, it seems as though there might be more going on with these two women, like they were either very close as best friends, or maybe they dated. Going back to the 8 months ago timeline, while changing at school, some mean girls make fun of Reena's leg hair, and they're very mean, calling her a beast and laughing. Later, while she's trying to buy a razor, Joe sees her and makes her feel less ashamed about it. She even encourages Reena to just take the razor, as in shoplift it. Cool girl Joe, who seems to be really free and does what she wants, quickly wins over Reena's affections and the girls start hanging out together. Joe even invites Reena to hang out later. At home, Reena's mother gets mail and it's either a legal notice or a bill we can't really see yet. Either way, she hides it from the rest of her family. Cam tells Reena's parents about the surveillance footage that Reena was seen walking away after the bridge incident. She asks if something had happened to Reena, would she feel comfortable coming home again? Because, yeah, if she survived the bridge incident, she should be home by now. Her father tells Cam that it's the Seven Oaks girls that have the devil in them. There's something rotten in Josephine. They're certain that they have a connection to Reena's disappearance. There's a photo of Cam, Gabe, and Rebecca in Rebecca's room, and her father asks about Cam, saying that it's a pity that they don't make up because he's always liked Cam. He also asks if Cam and Gabe were always just friends, and Rebecca says, yeah, but she also wouldn't know. In the earlier timeline, Reena's mom catches her shaving and she tells her mom what happened at school. Her mother doesn't understand or doesn't want to understand her daughter or even comfort her in her distress. She tells Reena that it's paganism to have this obsession with worldly things. Joe and Dusty take Rebecca down to the bridge and Joe starts telling Rebecca about what happened that night. Dusty fills in that Joe put a cigarette out right in between Reena's eyes as punishment for trying to ruin her life. They had a plan to teach Reena a lesson. They were kicking her while she was down. Everybody was joining in. They were kicking her in the stomach. They broke her teeth. And then they knocked her out when she started screaming. Then people ran off. They started to get freaked out. Joe waited until Reena came to when everybody was gone. She then pushed Reena over the bridge. This last part about Joe waiting and pushing Reena somehow is news to Dusty, who walks off and starts panicking. A birdwatching group later ends up finding Reena's body floating in the water and they call it in. There's quite a wholesome scene back in the earlier timeline one evening when Reena is sneaking out. Her uncle sees her and he also has a present for her and he tells her that it's not something that Jehovah would approve of. Anyway, she's honest to him and she tells him that she made a friend who invited her to a party and he tells her not to stay out too late. Dusty calls Reena's mom, but she loses her nerve and she hangs up. Cam pulls the records and she finds out where these calls have been coming from, so she goes over to Dusty to ask some questions. Cam also reveals that she lived there at Seven Oaks for a little while. Just as Dusty is about to talk, Cam gets a mayday call. Cam does tell Dusty that they found Reena's body. The relationship between Dusty and Reena could have been a genuine friendship. There were moments where it looked like Dusty felt bad whenever Joe was cruel to Reena, but her allegiance to Joe stopped her from really doing anything about it. Meanwhile, Joe brings Rebecca to a house party. Rebecca didn't want to be there, but Joe kind of strong-arms her, or Rebecca allows herself to be strong-armed. Reena's mother eventually shares the letter with her husband, and it's a letter from the Crown. This is some kind of legal court thing, and Canada's parole board explains in the letter that Majit Kirk, which is Reena's father, his criminal record has been expunged. Just then, Cam's dad shows up at the door, presumably with the bad news that Reena's body has been found. Meanwhile, the kids are all at a house party and that's when they all see on the news that Reena's body has been found. Josephine seems genuinely shocked that Reena is dead. Meanwhile, Cam is onto something, like she's made a break in the case and it has something to do with the timestamps on the CCTV footage and how far it takes to get from one place to another. It's not fully explained, but there's more at play for sure. And yeah, that is episodes 1 and 2 of Under the Bridge. Thank you for watching.